Space, a mostly empty plane of existence that surrounds us on all sides. If Earth is life, then space is the complete opposite. Life and space are incompatible. It's a cold, barren, dark wasteland, and no matter where we are, it's around us. So honestly, it makes perfect sense why so many horror films use this space, pun is intended. And as I've discussed in many of my previous videos, much of horror revolves around the fear of the unknown, and what could be more unknowable than the vast, uncharted expanse of space, making an ideal setting for horror. Let's start with the first film to use space in a way that was truly, I think, unsettling and horrific, that of course being 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like, yes, I know this is not the first film to use space in a creepy way, but 2001: A Space Odyssey I think was the first one to do it in the more modern sense. And it's also not very much of a horror film in the traditional sense, but the situation that we see our characters get themselves caught in is indeed undeniably horrific. And before getting into the plot details, spoilers are of course ahead, but honestly, if you haven't watched 2001 at this point, I don't know what to tell you. After a strange monolith begins to appear around space, one that is known for having evolutionary properties, a new mission directive is sent to the Discovery 1's computer, HAL 9000. However, HAL does not tell the crew members Dr. Bowman and Dr. Poole, instead leaving it to himself. So then, after HAL makes a mistake, the two doctors decide to try and disable the computer as they no longer trust a computer that is making mistakes with their own lives. This is where the horror comes into play, as when Poole is fixing an antenna line, Hal shoots a pod at Poole, severing his air line, effectively killing him. When Bowman goes out to save Poole, Hal then kills all the crew members in cryosleep, essentially leaving Bowman as the only survivor. Bowman then asks,
"Open the pod bay doors, Hal."
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Forcing Bowman to crash into the ship and disable Hal. While disabling him, the robot begs and pleads, but as his brain slowly gets turned off, he dies singing his favorite song.
Daisy, give me your answer, do.
So while the film isn't exactly a horror film per se, this sequence, one of many, would set the tone for many space-based horror films for years to come. First, the atmosphere in the sequence, or lack thereof if you want to be funny, is helped so much by the location the sequence is in. If this sequence wasn't in space and it was just a group of scientists trapped in a lab by a robot, then the tension would be much less, as they could just break outside and walk away because the robot can't go outside. But see, this is space. The scientists have nowhere to go. They are surrounded by nothingness. They can't flee. They can't escape. Their only sanctuary in the great unknown is now unsafe. That makes the atmosphere in this sequence particularly effective and would be used in many other horror films set in space, as it creates a more trapped feeling than can be done with a film set on Earth. There's this isolation that comes with space. They are alone. There's absolutely no one to save them. They are miles away from any help. The planet they are closest to is uninhabitable, meaning that they are hundreds of thousands of miles away from the nearest civilization. They are all alone, with a robot who has now made its mission to kill each and every single one of the crew members on board in horrific fashion, and that honestly makes for a horror movie type scenario. And, as is commonly said, in space, no one can hear you scream. This, of course, leads to what I think could be widely considered the first modern usage of the space horror trope. Alien is of course not the very first film to use space, especially not the first to convey its emptiness and loneliness, but it was the first to perfect it. Many other films would try to convey the loneliness and isolation that Alien portrays, but no other would succeed to the same degree that Ridley Scott's classic is able to achieve, not even the film's own sequels. Saying that the original Alien uses space horror nearly perfectly would be the understatement of the century in my opinion, as this, I believe, still holds up as one of the most frightening experiences put to screen. You can really feel the nothingness that surrounds them in the vast wasteland that is space, making the already tight corridors feel that much tighter. And the film shows they are not alone. Upon finding the xenomorph, they realize that there are other species of life within the known universe, but if the xenomorphs are anything to go by, you might not want to meet the other things that are in there. The film still holds up perfectly due to the space that we were given. Pun is of course intended. Sorry for all the space jokes in this video, by the way. Due to it being in space, everything in the film is required to be inside, as everything outside would wipe our crew out within seconds. Because of that, the space that is given to our characters, it's much more limited than it would be normally, making the claustrophobia of the film that much higher, which I've already talked about in some of my other videos. Once again, just like 2001, that the fact that the film is in space naturally means that there's absolutely nowhere to go. Everywhere around them is deadly. So they are stuck in this cramped ship with no one to save them, because just like 2001, there's no one nearby to help. And even if there was anyone nearby, they wouldn't help their ship anyway, due to Wayland Yutani caring more about bringing the alien back to them rather than the lives of their own crew. This also isn't helped that they are trapped within something that if it were to come into contact with civilization, it would mean the complete and utter extinction of the human race as we know it. We get a small glimpse of this in Aliens, as just one facehugger is able to reduce a whole colony into a barren wasteland infected with xenomorphs within days. That means within the film, not only are you trapped with an alien that could mean the extinction of the human race as we know it, but you're also dealing with a company that cares more about the planet destroying alien than your own life. There is no safe spaces in this film, and the safe spaces that do exist, such as Dallas, Parker, and Ash, are all eliminated by the foe or revealed to be antagonists in disguise. You cannot trust anyone within this film as being a true safe space, because no one in this film is truly safe. That's why this film is so frighteningly effective, but that's not to say that every single film that uses this trope is suddenly Alien or 2001. No, there's some real clunkers horror space films. Like, hell, many of them directly came after Alien came out, with films like Galaxy of Terror seeing the money that Alien made and tries to replicate the look and feel of that film. But overall, a lot of it is incredibly flat, as a lot of the passion behind Alien did not translate into the Roger Corman film, even with a young James Cameron running the production design of the film, who would later of course make the just as successful sequel to Aliens 5 years later. And in the 90s and the early 2000s, an even more aggravating form of space horror would come out, that of course being the space slasher film, which took the atmosphere and world building that made the first Alien film so frightening and combining it with a slasher movie villain like Jason for Jason X. Many of these films lacked the passion or creativity that came with something like Alien, forgetting the roots of what makes space horror so frightening. First off, the characters. With space horror's fear coming from characters we care about being trapped with an unknowable being, were extremely important. However, many of the films gave us the watered-down stereotypical characters that are commonplace within the subgenre. This does not exactly blend well with the whole idea behind space horror, which is the fear of being trapped with no hope for our characters besides their own wits and teamwork. Thus, many of these slasher films feel quite hollow, as the whole space aspect of these films being just absurd gimmicks rather than truly thought out and explored in a way that makes for interesting cinema. However, there is one branch of space horror that is still going alive and well to this very day, with the most common branch of it now being that of combining the elements that made films like Alien so successful with cosmic horror monsters. One of the first films to do this, despite its interesting quality, is 1997's Event Horizon. This film combines the atmosphere and world building of Alien with demons and hell-like monsters straight out of Hellraiser. And despite the film's unfortunate execution, the idea of the film is still quite interesting and frightening, because it combines the fear of the unknown with the fear that comes along with the subgenre, as these people are now trapped with said fear. That makes these films interesting in their own right, due to just how well these two concepts combine with one another, as without it, Event Horizon would honestly just be another Alien clone. But of course, this isn't dedicated to just film. Now, you can't talk about modern space horror without mentioning one specific medium, that of course being video games, which space horror has really taken a stronghold in. There's Metroid, Dead Space, and even Alien Isolation, which all take the concept of space horror and make it so that we must play through the horrific scenarios ourselves. I've already done a whole video on how the Metroid games do it, but Dead Space I think does it the best. Dead Space traps you with a monster, the Necromorphs, that is much more like John Carpenter's The Thing. Just like most of space horror, there is no escape. You are stuck on this ship with those things, and they want to take you out as quickly as possible. What also makes the necromorphs so frightening is just like the thing, the necromorphs adapt to what's around them really quickly, as they come in all shapes and sizes, with some being small and others being full size, and all are just as deadly as the last. And it makes it so that all those tight corridors that you have to explore, that there might be one of those monsters hiding somewhere in it that could pop out and kill you at any moment. However, while I think Dead Space does the whole concept the best, Alien Isolation perfected this feeling more so than any other game, as unlike Dead Space, which pre-planned all the scares within it, making second playthroughs less frightening, and instead made it so that the alien would react to one thing, and if it noticed it, you were completely doomed. That of course being sound, and I swear that quite literally everything in this game was extremely loud. That made it so throughout the game that the alien truly could jump you if you weren't paying any attention, as it could hear everything, and made the game a truly frightening and invigorating experience. And that is how space horror is used in most cases. And remember, if you enjoyed the video, to like and subscribe, and let me know down in the comments whether or not you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next week.